Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? It's great to be here. I've got some notes just from some prompts, so bear with me as I look down at my screen occasionally. I'm Simon Windsor, Joint MD of Hammerhead VR. We're a virtual reality and immersive content studio. We're a pure play VR studio, so we established ourselves back in 2013 with the mission to create genre-defining VR experiences, both in the commercial sector, but also in the entertainment space. So we work with brands and organisations direct, a bit like Resh was talking about earlier with Framestore, but we also work on our own IP and our own properties. Most of the work we do is created in Unreal Engine. We have a specialist pipeline which we've worked hard over the last 3 years to develop. And we're fortunate because we've worked with where's the clicker? That's the clicker. Some quite cool brands. So we've worked with people like Lexus, Sunseeker, Jaguar, up at the top there with Andy Murray on Wimbledon, IBM, HSBC, Royal Navy, all on different use cases. Some of those are marketing-based use cases, advertising, experiential. Others are data visualization and more complex, potentially commercial products, which take rich, complex data sets and look at how we can engage in the VR space to make sense of that information and for organisations to be able to use it more effectively. Today I'm going to talk to you about an area that I'm particularly interested in, and that's creativity within VR. And this kind of asks a question more than gives answers to that question, so bear with me. VR is a creative portal. A quick question, how many people in this room are actually developing in VR, working in VR in some kind? Okay, so pretty much everyone. And most people developers, so on the application content side? Okay, so much like us in our work in VR at Hammerhead over the last few years, we continue to ask questions around how is it best to conceive and imagine and design experiences, as per some of the talks that have gone into more detail today. How do we create experiences that are truly engaging for users and really add value, new value? Everyone in this room who just raised their hands, we're all part of a creative movement, which includes artists, writers, storytellers, filmmakers, developers, but also leading companies, organisations, research institutes and academia that are looking at the pursuit to imagine and explore VR's potential. And the sheer amount of the effort, the rule breaking, the inventiveness, the creativity that's going into that right now is quite phenomenal. I work in VR, So when you think about our creative evolution and the tools that we use, from carving in stone, from paint to pens, to musical instruments, cameras, computers, mobile phones as we have them today, our ability to creatively express ourselves has constantly advanced. We're seemingly magical leaps at each new medium and with each new tool. As humans, we constantly strive to tell stories and realise our imaginations in new and inventive ways. You could say to be human is to imagine. We think about the world in the way in which we experience it. And we experience the world in 4 dimensions, the 3 dimensions of space and the dimension of time. VR is the first medium that allows us to create and step through into the 4-dimensional world and to do crazy things. We're seeing that all around us at the moment with the creative tools that are now becoming available to us. For example, in gaming, we're all familiar with Valkyrie, with, I've forgotten the name of it now, Soundstage, in terms of music creation, Mind Show, and of course Tilt Brush, Medium, Quill and others that allow us to create and paint in VR. So it makes sense then that VR can be the perfect medium in which to inspire creativity. And this is just the beginning. The medium has the potential to go way beyond entertainment, way beyond storytelling, way beyond brand experiential, arguably with implications for any vertical sector that you can imagine. At Hammerhead, we've been working with companies such as VW and with the Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute and the Human Genome Project, looking at exploring the potential of VR to visualize and interpret big data. The intention is to draw insight from the data more quickly by using the 4 dimensions of space. This is an example, a screen grab from an early prototype midway through last year. In fact, it's dated, you can see it, which has moved on since then, which started to explore how you could make data physical in a virtual sense. And then what that would mean in terms of understanding that data when you interact with it and you bring others into the room, the virtual room, to interact with it and explore that together. What should that room be like? What should that environment be? How do we optimize the environment in order to stimulate the process of understanding rich data sets? In the case of VW, turning data into physical objects, you know, within this conditioned space is showing really exciting early promise that can save both time and money for an organisation that deals with billions. You know, billions in terms of the amount of money that's generated through procurement, but also in terms of the time that's invested throughout the organisation to make the processes work. And then with the Human Genome Project, the ability to recognise patterns more quickly, you know, could save researchers months, if not years, in time when we look at things such as pattern recognition. It's far easier for us to identify patterns in a 4-dimensional space when you're in the environment than it is if you're looking at it on a 2D screen. So the potential has pretty big implications, and that's just one example, data visualization, but there's more. If VR enables us to play in space and time, to create and collaborate in virtual dimensions of our own making, then in principle we can create the conditions for either greater creativity, thinking and imagination. You could say that VR has the potential to augment our imaginations and to supercharge our creativity. And if this is possible, then the big problems, you know, some of the problems that we're trying to solve as a global society today, or ideas that haven't even been conceived, can be accelerated and imagined. So what's the evidence for this? Because, you know, where is the evidence? If you look up at the stars, and I'm sure everyone here at some point in time has looked up at the stars, you know, when they're shining so bright, it's almost like you can reach up and touch them. You don't get those nights very often in London, by the way. The feeling is that, you know, the feeling you get is an example of what we call experiencing the sublime, which is associated with feelings of awe, with terror, you know, with fear. And this is based on neurological studies that were conducted in 2014, which, if you're interested, I can share more details about. So when viewing something sublime, like the stunning night sky, or like looking over the edge of a cliff at the Grand Canyon, we lose sense of ourselves. And neuroscience research shows that VR has a very, very similar effect. If we can create a feeling of the sublime and a sense of loss, then we're in a space for creativity to happen, and I'll explain why. In studies in MRI scans, for example, show the same area of the brain, the hippocampus, ignites in VR. So when you're in VR, you get the same effect on the brain as if you're experiencing something amazing, something awesome. This area of the brain is important to memory and spatial coding, or cognitive mapping, so how we understand and navigate the world. And in the case of VR, it's important to the feeling of presence. In a virtual reality environment, this loss of self is key to a meaningful experience, and it also helps to explain why people end up doing things such as this.
Oh my God.
I've seen that before. Essentially, the brain accepts that we're in the place in the VR environment, even though we know we're actually not there. But the hippocampus is also critical for the function of imagination, and therefore how we form ideas. Science is only really beginning to understand how the brain works, you know, how creativity is a whole brain process. But VR does stimulate the area of the brain involved in our imagination. As Steve Jobs said, creativity is just about connecting things. The problem is, as we get older, so the process of our brains making and breaking these connections to inform our imagination become more difficult, a phenomenon in humans known as neuroplasticity. Imagination and creativity are tied to our neuroplasticity. So the question is, can VR augment our brain's capability and stimulate neuroplasticity as we grow older? And it's not just making connections in our brain where VR might aid creativity. It's also about connecting us, connecting people in this room. Minds coming together in a shared experience designed to think creatively. We know that sharing ideas can often develop thoughts and, we know that sharing ideas can often develop them faster, and VR is the ideal medium to create the playground to bring people together and spark the imagination. It makes sense then that VR could be the perfect medium for welcoming new ideas and solving real-world problems. The list on the right-hand side there, for example, focus by removing external distractions when we're in virtual reality. Not only that, it's been proven that the feeling of focus persists once you come out of virtual reality. So the creative consultancy IDEO, for example, ran an experiment, and they found that just 20 minutes in VR first thing in the morning could inspire a creative process and give you a positive feeling throughout the day, which they saw results from. The stimulus for the creative brain, the feeling of the sublime, the loss of self, putting ourselves in scenarios that can help us think more deeply. Collaboration, we can connect together from different parts of the world in virtual reality. Our minds, or the greatest minds if you like, can work together on solving some of the most difficult challenges. And they can do that without travelling. They can enter spaces which are designed and conditioned for optimal creativity. Interaction, I gave the example of VW. What does virtual physical data feel like? What does it feel like, and how do we learn, how do we benefit from data if we turn it into physical objects? It's energizing. VR studies have shown that if you enter VR, even for a short period of time, actually you can feel quite energized by the experience. And that's quite interesting because it can be a negative or a positive experience. You can have the worst horror experience, as gentleman before was talking about, or you can have something really glorious, but actually the effect on your brain is very much the same, and the feeling of positivity and energizing you. And diversity. One of the things that goes into great problem solving and great creativity is the idea that people come together with different perspectives, different experiences, and they share those. Well, in VR we can do that. We can create the platform to allow people to come together with diverse views to help solve the same problems. For example, Google Earth VR is a great way for us to be able to access different parts of the globe with almost immediate effect. If I'm working on, I don't know, an example here, if I'm working on something and I need to be based in Italy, I can drop into Venice if I so desire, and I can experience the culture, I can experience the architecture, even if it's only for 15 minutes. That has proven to have an effect on how we might then think creatively around a problem that involves the Italian culture. So, thank you for listening today. As I said at the start, I'm interested in the process of creativity and the potential role of VR within that, and it'd be great if anyone's interested to chat about that further. This also extends to the work that we're doing at Hammerhead. It's very early days in terms of some of the exploration work we're doing on this with our clients, but we are thinking about this and working on it day in, day out at the moment. We hear lots about the first killer VR app, and which we tend to think of in terms of consumer adoption, public consciousness, when does it break through into the mainstream? But for me, the killer application of the technology is that it could be our ability to augment our imaginations like never before. And as Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. That's it. Thank you very much. Any questions? Go for it.
Hi. Has there been any actual study, any brainwave studies, or over the course of your research to dictate or to indicate that the brain does actually improve during the experience of VR?
Yes. So I didn't list I didn't list them, but all of the facts that were raised through the presentation there are based on science. It's worth saying I'm not a neurologist, neuroscientist, but I do follow the space quite closely. So the experimentation is ongoing in lots of different institutes and universities, but the early indicators are that VR does trigger parts of the brain which are responsible for imagination, and therefore the logic goes that as we explore that further, we could start to understand and tap into those areas of the brain to enhance our creativity. It's a bit, at the moment we think about creativity as we're used to designing experiences, light bulb moments, working in teams on brainstorming sessions, etc. As we move towards, I suppose a transhuman phase, as technology becomes more pervasive as part of our physical being, then it makes sense that we could augment our imaginations and our intellect. So, we'll see.
Sorry, just to continue with that. They call VR the empathy machine. Can it be used for that?
Absolutely. So we tell a lot of stories as part of the work that we do at Hammerhead. We have a team of, our team is designed of developers, artists, animators, but we've also got creative directors, we've got writers in-house as well, both from film and game. And a lot of the work we do for our clients is around telling stories. We created an experience last year for Wimbledon, for Jaguar, for the sponsorship of Wimbledon, which told a moment in time. The brief was, to elicit emotion, we wanted to make people cry. That was, that's a tough brief to tackle. But it told a story which connected with the audience in a way in which achieved empathy and which, delivered the results. So it can be hugely powerful in that regard. Hi.
What business sectors do you view as more apt to approach this new technology in terms of viewing it as a creative process?
What sectors do I think will embrace it first, or have the potential to embrace it first?
Yeah, where is it going to go, business-wise?
I really think like all great ideas, 5% maybe get off the ground, right? So we work a lot with clients in different sectors on different briefs, and probably 5% of the great ideas actually get taken up. Our learning is that actually it comes down to a collective mindset of wanting to be brave to pursue the potential. No one really knows until you start getting involved. I think Jed was saying earlier that these days it's a lot quicker and a lot easier to R&D and to identify what works and what doesn't work in VR. That's absolutely true. But you still need clients and organisations to be brave in their willingness to explore. And right now that's the key thing, the exploration. And that applies to any sector. I can think of a use case that could add huge value in most sectors you can raise. So it really comes down to appetite and timing.
Quick follow-up on that?
Yeah.
Well, we're having a lot of fun with VR, so I've got great hopes personally for becoming a part of our culture environment. Some people argue, though, that it's a fad, it's going to be a fad. Some people are brave to try it, it's a gimmick, it will give you attention for a while and it's going to fade away. Now I hope that's not the case, I don't believe it. What's your view on those who say that?
I'll quote Bill Gates. I think he said that the first 2 years in a new technology are always overestimated, and the first 10 years are underestimated. The industry's been massively hyped, but I do believe that there's a huge amount of value add in the technology and in the medium, and value that we can't even imagine now, because we're right at the very beginning. The first wave of consumer devices. In 10 years' time, we'll be looking back and we'll be comparing VR headsets of today, a bit like we look back and can think about the old Nokia mobile phones, if you like, before we had touchscreens and before applications came along. So in that regard, I think there's a huge amount of value, and it's also important to distinguish between VR and AR. There's a lot of press that confuses the two still to this day, which amazes me, because in VR, very simply, you are taking yourself into another world. You're entering a digital world of anyone's creation. In AR, we are bringing that digital content or digital into our real world. So there's a very different approach to how you might use the technologies and what the use cases for different industries will be.